Thunder Rolling in the Mountains, chapters 2 and 3. At dawn, the wind no longer blew from Hawk's Peak. It blew from all three of the towering peaks down upon our village. No fires burned outside that morning because of the wind. I went through the great lodge and divided the coos roots we had gathered. I told my father about the white people who were living in a cabin on one of the creeks that fed Willowa River. How they were digging gold. I said nothing about the hole I had shot in the woman's copper pan. They were the first, but more are on the way, he said. He often talked to me, for he had no sons. Unlike other girls in our village, I often talked back. We will stop them. Here we stand, I said. I felt angry when I thought of white people cutting the trees and planting wheat where our horses and cattle roamed. No, daughter. We're few and they are many. They're locusts, and they'll devour us. Not if we stand and fight. If we fight, they'll devour us all the quicker. My father turned his back, which meant that he would not listen to another word. His mind was made up. I do not like this wind, he said. It sounds like many horses running. Joseph, my father, son of old Joseph, was an honored chieftain of the Nimipu. He was their chieftain because he could see far away into the land of the suns and moons, that they had not yet risen. At the snowflakes before they fell, the small green worm deep in the ruddy apple, the thought before it is spoken, he was a kind, gentle man, for me too kind with the whites. He was not a warrior. On the backs of the running horses are soldiers, he said. Their leader is Howard. The man who has only one arm, I asked. My father nodded. We were standing among some trees on the shore of Willowa Lake. Waves piled up on the shore. Stout trees thrashed and bent. The mats around the bottom of the lodge flat like birds ready to fly away. My father stood tall and broad-shouldered. He had black hair that he wore in 2 long braids tied with ribbons. He used to play games with me, but not anymore. Not since the white men had come to root gold, root gold from our hills and streams. And I had stood with those who would fight. Why does the white leader return? I asked. You answered him once. You spoke plain words to him. He returns because he does not believe what I told him. Now you'll tell him again. This time he rides with soldiers. But still, you will tell him. My father did not answer. His silence made me afraid that at last, he would weaken and give in to the soldiers. A single horse ran swiftly toward us. On its back was two whole soaked, an honored priest of the dreamers and leaders of the of the rovers from the Seven Devils country. He was in Wallowa to speak with my father about the soldiers. They come, he called. The one-armed general leads them. I know, my father said. I hear their horses. The sun was dying as he stood beside the lake. In the last of its light, a band of soldiers rode out of the woods. They came fast through our village. Out in front rode General Howard, the man who had one arm and wore silver stars on his jacket. He pulled up in front of us, and a soldier came out and stood beside my father to help the 2 men talk together. As I rode through your village, the general said, I looked but saw not one sign that you planned to heed my order and move your people from Wallowa. My father answered him in a gentle voice. We have decided not to move to Lapway. This is our place. It is small and far away. It has little grass to feed our many horses. You have 1,000 horses, Chief Joseph, General Howard said. You have thousands of horses. You have more horses than you can ever use or sell. My father said, I have been to Lapway to look. There are Indians living in Lapway already. I saw 3 lodges and many teepees. I will move them, the one armed general said. Everyone will be moved, and there will be much room in Lapway. That is not good to drive people from their homes, my father said. A furious gust of wind bore down upon us. The general's beard blew straight out. The 2 men stood and stared at each other. In a tangle of trees behind them, 3 men, 2 of them in red jackets, were watching. They had ridden up silently. I knew all of them. The redcoats were warriors who had sworn to fight General Howard and his soldiers to the death. Their leader was Wah-lit-its. He hated the whites because his father was murdered by a white man who had never been punished for his crime or for the crime. Red Moccasin Tops, his cousin, hated the whites for the same reason. They lived for the day they would take revenge. They wore their red jackets as warning signs to the whites of the revenge that would come. To one side, among the trees, stood a tall young man, his hair piled on top of his head, and a leather band painted with flying birds tied tightly around his forehead. Swan Necklace was cousin to both redcoats, but was there, I knew, only to guard their horses. He didn't hate the soldiers or the white settlers or anyone else, not even his own father, who called him an idler and sometimes knocked him down with a sharp cuff on the ear. He would get to his feet again, brush the dirt from his jacket, and smile. The last time his father, old 2 Moons, gave him a thrashing, I was watching. It was 3 suns ago. Early in the morning, Swan Necklace had been away all night in the mountains. He went to the mountains to gather baskets of earth, all colors of earth, yellows and reds and blues. He mixed the colors with something that looked like water but was really a secret of his own, and painted pictures of the sun and moon, of birds and deer and buffalo. He painted the pictures on dresses and jackets, on mats and skins, if the owners wanted them. The paint never rubbed off or faded. As soon as Swan Necklace slid off his horse, the morning he came back from the mountains, his father grabbed the baskets of earth and scattered them on the ground. Listen, idler, all the hills and valleys and meadows in this realm of the living, he said, listen to me. His son listened and smiled a little, but more to himself than to 2 Moons. Death stalks the land of the wandering waters, his father said. We are surrounded by soldiers who are here to drive us from our homes or to kill us. Our young warriors, you know them all. Many are your relatives, have armed themselves and stand ready to face the soldiers to die. And here you come riding in from the mountains with dirt to paint pictures. He gave Swan Necklace a shove that sent him sprawling. He stood over him and said, I gave Red Moccasin Tops and Wah-lit-its the blankets from which they made their red jackets. Now I give them my son to take care of the horses. I have spoken to them. They will accept you as a horse holder. Go now and talk about horses. Swan Necklace got to his feet, but he hung back and did not leave us. His father said, You have no choice. Go, or I'll banish you from the clan. You will be a wanderer for the rest of your life, no longer a Nimipu. Swan Necklace glanced at me. We had grown up together. I had loved him for a long time, for as many moons as there are stars. I put my hand over my heart and gave him a secret sign of love. Without a word, he went off to walk to the red coats. Chapter 3. The wind swirled high in the treetops. The one-armed general let go of his beard. My father unwrapped his light folds of his blanket. The general said, "Tell me, chief of the Willowa Nez Perce, one whose intelligence is praised by friends and enemies alike. Tell me, do you believe that I have spoken to you before and speak to you now with two tongues?" "With one tongue only," my father said, and I too speak with one tongue. Believe me when I say that we do not wish to move to Lapway." "I believe you, Chief Joseph. So you must believe me. I say again to you and to your clan that you must leave Wallowa." My father thought hard. His mouth was closed tight and his hands were pressed across his chest. We glanced at the snowy peaks, at the blue lake, and at the green meadows fading with the sun. "You do not understand that. Wallowa is my home, and I do not understand why." The general was not listening. He said something to one of his soldiers, who smiled, but my father did not notice. I noticed and held my breath in fear. "When I had lived on this earth for 10 snows," my father said, "in this beautiful place that surrounds us, I climbed that mountain." He paused and pointed to the mountain with both hands open. "High up where I could look beyond in all directions. I made a bed on a stone. I had no water and no food. I closed my eyes and put a pebble in my nose and a pebble in each ear to keep me awake. I floated far beyond the sky, far beyond the world. 5 suns I lay there, my stomach on the cold stone, my mouth burning with thirst. I began to wonder how many suns would rise before my guardian spirit came and spoke to me." The general still was not listening. My father went on. He was talking more to himself than to the general. "I wondered if my guardian spirit would come, if he would leave me nameless and alone because I was unworthy of being a man. Then, without a sound, out of a quiet night, he came, and I could not see him. Whether he was young or old, I cannot say, but clearly I heard him speak a name. I climbed down happy from the snow mountain. Other young men, my friends, had also gone to the sacred place and were given names. We chanted our names until the moon went down and the sun came up. I have many names, but Thunder Rolling in the Mountains is the name that binds me forever to this land of the wandering waters. I am tired of talk," the general said. "I have heard enough talk. You and your people will leave Wallowa before 30 suns come and go." Tu-Hol-Ho-Sot was walking up and down staring out from the folds of his blanket. He was a huge man with a fierce eye and a rumbling voice. "Who are you to tell us what we must do?" he said to the general. "You did not make these mountains. The spirit chief made the mountains. He made the streams, the meadows, the trees, the grass, the beasts that eat the grass, and the birds that that weave it into nest. The spirit chief made everything. Who is this man that will tell us to leave our home, our mother, and go to a place that does not belong to us?" "I am that man," the general said. My father moved between them. I am sure he feared that the hot words would end in a bad fight. Once, when the general first came to Lapway, he fought with Tu-Hol-Ho-Sot, but put chains on him and locked him up in a soldier's jail. I can't move my people to Lapway now, my father said. The Snake River is flooding. We would need to cross from one shore to the other through torrents of water. Many of my people are women and children, or women, children, and the old. I have thousands of cattle. Half of them would be swept away. The general pointed a glittering sword at my father. Listen, he shouted. I have heard enough excuses. Now I speak my last words. If you have not moved your tribe from this place before 30 suns have risen and set, then I shall send soldiers with guns to drive you out. My father drew his blanket close about him. I hear your words, he said. I carry them to our people. In 30 suns we will be gone. There must be no blood. General Howard nodded his head. He did not smile, but there was a glint of pleasure in his eyes. He motioned to a soldier. The soldier blew a trumpet, and the band galloped off. My father watched them cross the meadow, splash through the stream, and swiftly disappear. While he watched them and said nothing, I saw the redcoats scramble out of the bushes. Swan Necklace was waiting with his horses, with their horses. He got on his own horse, and the three of them rode off. I knew where the redcoats were going. Swift as arrows, they would ride to the village and tell all they had heard. They would say that Chief Joseph had given in to the one-armed general. They would say that Tu-ho-ho-sot had stood up to the general. Every word he had said would be said again. The young warriors would listen to my father, for they loved him, but they would not obey him. They would never leave Wallowa. They would follow Tu-ho-ho-sot to death if that is where he led them. This was good. The idea of being driven away by soldiers to a strange place far from the home I loved made wild thoughts flash through my mind. I saw myself riding into the soldiers' camp with a torch, setting fire to their tents. I saw myself take aim with my rifle and shoot a soldier from his horse. I saw another soldier running across the meadow, and I shot him too.